All right, well, welcome everyone to day 2 of NomCon. We had a really amazing day yesterday. It was not without some challenges, and so I appreciate everyone that stuck through yesterday, was patient with us, and we think we got everything resolved, so today should go a lot more smoothly technically, but we're really, really excited about all the content and the conversation that happened yesterday, and we have many more days of that to come, so today and then 2 more days after that, so we're really excited. A few things to keep in mind today. So we have a lot of really great content. We have some great content from the US Department of Energy, their geothermal challenge. And if you're like, what does making have to do with geothermal? Just go to the session and find out. But I'll tell you a little bit that has to do with additive manufacturing. So if you're interested in additive, you definitely want to be there. Today, we also have discussion about the Maker event playbook. There have been a lot of folks on our working group that have been working on that. It's ready to be released and for people to engage in that process. We have a few great sessions on community builds, a grant writing session that's about making, that comes from someone who actually is a grant maker. So they will tell you what they're looking for, some discussions on business growth models, and of course, a cocktail hour at the end. And so we'll have a lot of fun. And the other thing that's happening today, which is exciting, is I have decided that sitting in a chair all day is very hard. And so at 2:50, from 2:50 to 3:05, I will be running yoga in the hallway with Dorothy. And I am not a yoga professional, so I found a video online that I will be showing you, and we will walk through it together. If you're interested in that, and if your back is hurting after a long day of really great content, please come find me at 2:50 Eastern. It's on the in that hallway. It has a note that says Yoga with Dorothy. Please come join me. I just want to say one more thing, which is we have these virtual exhibit booths, and I don't know that people know about them, or maybe they're just so excited about the actual content of NomCon that they're just forgetting to go there, but go to the exhibit booths. We have exhibitors from XPRIZE, from Matter Hackers, and ShopBot, and they have giveaways. So today, Matter Hackers is having their daily giveaway drawing, and they're doing it every day of NomCon, but today's giveaway is a $100 Matter Hackers gift card. That's a pretty decent amount of filament. So you guys should go to their booth, and if you check off, if you just add them as a session and go to their booth, you're entered into that drawing, and one of you guys will win some money for some free filament or towards a 3D printer or any number of other things that they carry at Matter Hackers. Also, tomorrow, XPRIZE is going to have a live session at 2 p.m., and so you should check out their booth. And then we also have a film screening going on. There is a lot going on, guys. So Me and My Robot is an amazing movie. The filmmakers that have made Me and My Robot have given us access to the screening anytime you want. So you don't have to watch it during NomCon. And then they're going to have a session on Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern time where you can talk to Alex Crooks about the film and have some question and answer dialogue. So there's a lot going on in NomCon. We know it's a lot. If you need a break, take yoga, come out into the hallway, but we just really want you to enjoy your time here. And we're so grateful that you have come to be with us another day. So without further ado, you didn't come here to hear me. You came here to hear Paul. Dr. Paul Bunje is the co-founder and COO, CSO of Conservation X Labs, which is a wonderful organization that brings innovation to global conservation threats. Conservation X Labs brings technology and entrepreneurship to protect biodiversity using a mix of crowdsourcing, open innovation, directed research, and acceleration. And they have a digital makerspace, guys. Paul was formerly the chief scientist at the XPRIZE Foundation, got a lot of cross interactions happening here, spanning civil society, environment, energy, health, and exploration. Dr. Bunje is a global thought leader in bringing innovation to solve environmental grand challenges. Paul was formerly the founding executive director of the UCLA Center for Climate Change Solutions, the managing director of the Los Angeles Regional Collaborative for Climate Action and Sustainability, and he served on the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council for Oceans. The American Association for the Advancement of Science has selected Paul as one of 40 individuals that exemplify the thousands of AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellows, which I'm also honored to be one of those, who are dedicated to applying science to serve society. Paul is trained formally in biology, and he has a BS from the University of Southern California and a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. Go Bears. Without further ado, I present to you Dr. Paul Bunje.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. I love that introduction, partly because I do love that we're both AAAS fellows and bears, which is fantastic. I'm so excited to be with everyone today, even though it's virtual. This is such an amazing group, and NomCon brings together such remarkable leaders in not just the maker movement, but ways that we can really empower everyone to be a part of solving global grand challenges. And so I want to talk a little bit today about what we do at Conservation X Labs, and some additional thoughts that might be valuable as everyone continues to think about how it is that we can empower everyone to accomplish big goals. At Conservation X Labs, our goal is to end the sixth mass extinction, and we don't feel like it's worth doing small things, much like most of you. We feel like with the number of threats facing this planet, we all need to come together and take things on. But we do that because we know it's possible to accomplish great things in the face of massive challenge and change. Speaking of XPRIZE, I love this quote from the founder of XPRIZE. There's a lot of XPRIZE love, which is fantastic. Great people. Obviously, I spent many fun years there. And Peter Diamandis pointed out that the tyranny of experts is really over today. In fact, he always liked to say that experts are those people who can tell you exactly how it can't be done. And what we need to do is bring in new perspectives, new voices, democratize the ability for everyone to be a part of solutions creation and innovation, because that's where we're going to make the radical breakthroughs that are necessary. And some examples of there are replete examples everywhere, but there are phenomenal things such as the public solving really difficult problems using Foldit, this crowdsourced gaming app, computer gamers who solved a really difficult AIDS research program a number of years ago, and on and on and on, where if we open up challenges to the crowd at large, we can actually make significantly better progress and identify new solutions that those who are trained for many years have failed to see, simply because we become myopic, we become too focused on our knowledge. And we want to apply that to the sixth mass extinction. I don't want to dwell too much on the negative. There's a lot of negative today, but of course, even in the face of massive social injustice and the pandemic and everything else, species continue to go extinct at an alarming rate. And in fact, species are going extinct now at a rate that's at least 1,000, perhaps 10,000 times faster than it is at a geological baseline extinction rate, as it's called. In other words, this is currently the fastest of all mass extinctions that the planet has ever seen, remembering that some of the previous ones, like the end of the Cretaceous, saw the extinction of non-bird dinosaurs, or the Permian, where 99% plus of all species went extinct. We're facing that now, and we want to reverse that, quite candidly. We need to, if we want to protect the planet that has given birth to our civilization and nurtures our everyday lives. So that's our purpose at Conservation X Labs, to end this human-induced extinction. This sixth mass extinction, while the sixth of several, is the only one to have ever been caused by a single species, in this case, our species. And what that means is we have to somehow think about protecting nature in a new way. This was the historical way of protecting nature. Humans are causing the problem, so let's wall them off. But of course, that hasn't really worked. Humans affect every single part of the globe, and climate change alone means that no matter how far away a plot of land or a speck of ocean is from human presence, it is still directly impacted in potentially severe ways by our activities. We can't just wall off humans. And in fact, we've been doing that for some time, very successfully, increasing the number of protected areas, both on land and in the sea. You can see this exponential growth rate in the amount of space and number of protected areas globally. So how are we doing? How is that working to slow down the extinction rates that we talked about? Well, these are the rates of extinctions and or population size of many animals that have been measured, and you can see that even over that time they continue to decline. what we're seeing is an increase in protected areas and a continued decrease in species. It's quite simply not enough. Unfortunately, the problems are getting exponentially worse, but the solutions we've got to date are merely incremental. And when that happens, the difference between the problems and the solutions grows. We need a way to both slow down the problems and to create exponential solutions. And much as humans have created these problems, we have the means to solve them. And I really do truly believe, as difficult a time as we're living through, it's also not only one of the most interesting, but certainly one of the most consequential in all of history, because we both know the problems in great detail. Scientists have done a phenomenal job tracking the problems in the world, including scientists in my own field of conservation biology, doing a great job creating massive lists of things that are going extinct. But rather than just knowing and writing epithets for extinction, we also, as it turns out, have more tools at our disposal than at any time in human history. And by more, I mean exponentially more than even just a few years ago. We have the tools to do something about this, and I believe that we actually can, using efforts such as those that all of you lead in your makerspaces. So this is why we want to bring a new hope to conservation through thinking about exponential innovation. We want revolutionary, not just evolutionary solutions, things that can leapfrog what we're currently doing and give us the 10x number of solutions that we need to address things. We have to harness these exponential trends. And there's ways to do that that have been brought into lots of fields. And I know I'm preaching to the choir with the amount of work that you all do to expand the networks and the communities that are involved in making. That is an exponential function. Mine in conservation has resisted that trend to date, or lagged behind other fields like global health and development. But I believe we're at an inflection point where this is about to change. First, by harnessing exponential technologies. And I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but I do want to put this here as just an example of the remarkable tools that we have at our disposal that I couldn't even imagine when I was in college, for example. Ubiquitous sensing, the ability to monitor literally everything on the planet, including you can even monitor the health of an individual coral underneath the water, for example, and understand what's happening to its microenvironment. That kind of knowledge gives us power to intervene. AI, of course, has transformed our ability to monitor and analyze and even forecast what's happening in the world. Robotics, synthetic biology, VR, additive manufacturing, 3D printing. These are the kinds of things that have democratized access to solutions and given power to ideas that simply did not exist even a decade ago. These are the sorts of things that I know you all are already harnessing in your work, but these are the sorts of things that we can continue to push even further and add to this list, this growing list. And how do we add to it? How do we harness it really? Well, I believe that the best way, quite candidly, is not just having these technologies out there, but by thinking about how to harness them into transformative innovation. The biggest piece of this, in my mind, is to harness human behavior rather than fighting against it. We are humans, and we have some good things going for us. We are motivated to change. We are passionate. We are good. We want to help other people. As if quarantine life has taught us anything, is that we are an inherently social species, and sitting at home all day without being able to physically hug somebody and see people is horrifying to almost all of us, including the introverts among us, like my poor wife, who is really, really tired of being stuck at home with me and my extroversion that doesn't really work in quarantine. The other thing we need to do is be optimistic. Pessimism doesn't get you anywhere, but the ability to see pragmatically that there are real opportunities into the future gives weight to optimism and an energy and a voice that we can use to sing from the mountaintops the opportunities that we have to really change. Then we have to get practical. We can't just create cool innovations and show them off. We have to ensure that these are scalable, financially sustainable, that they work in the real economy, that there are people that will pick them up and use them and turn them into the things we use every day instead of the existing products that we might, for example. Let me give you one awesome example that I think synthetic biology and such is transforming things. One of the biggest drivers of deforestation and thus and climate change and thus species extinction is the production of beef and meat. Plant-based meats and cellular lab-grown meats are a core solution to this that are proving to have markets that people want to replace some of those meats and therefore some of the drivers of extinctions. That's harnessing the market in a way that can actually be transformative and scalable for good. We also need to engage the margins and integrate all perspectives. This gets back to that notion of the tyranny of experts being over. Innovation happens at the edges of industries, the edges of disciplines, the edges of communities. When we start to see different perspectives and how those can influence what we're doing, question the assumptions that are at the core of the status quo, and identify new ways to jump forward by harnessing the exponential. This is how we do it, I think. And this is what I want to talk about, empowering everyone. Again, none of this is going to be surprising or new, but I think it's useful from time to time to stop and see just how powerful the tools we have today to harness the innovators among us. There are things like crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, ways of approaching problems like design thinking that have been around for decades, mass collaboration, where we can get groups of people together to identify problems and solve them more rapidly than ever before. Advanced market commitments, where industry or government can say, you know what, we don't have an answer to this problem, but if somebody comes up with it, we'll buy your product. That unleashes capital in a way that very few other things can. So do challenges and prizes, capitalizing on human behavior's desire to compete and to try hard and to be glorified for having done something remarkable in the world. Why does this work? Well, because we now have access to more people on the planet and their amazing brains than ever before. Just look at the growth in the number of internet users globally over the last 20 years. What we're talking about, since 2010 to now, 3 billion new minds connected to the internet, 3 billion people with the opportunity to be change makers and innovators. That's an that's more than were connected in 2010. That's the kind of power we have to harness genius. And if another former colleague of mine once said, as smart as you and your team are, with this many people in the world, the smartest person in your field does not work for you, does not work with you. But that's not something to be ashamed of. This is an opportunity to go get that person, wherever they may be, whether they are in a university in South Korea or are in a grade school in Johannesburg. They're potentially there now, ready to help. There's incentives that people are looking for to do these. This is that harnessing human behavior I talked about. Sometimes money's good. Sometimes people have extra time and they can work on a gig and they want to have some fun. We can gamify things. Humans love to have fun. We can actually make that a part of things. That's why people will spend their spare time volunteering or making stuff. The credibility, the ego, let's not look past the fact that it's worthwhile celebrating when people do amazing things. We should be patting each other on the back as often as we can and showcasing that the passion people brought to this, real, genuine passion to the problems we want to solve, is valuable. And we appreciate and are grateful to people for having done it. And then, like I said, sometimes we want to compete. It feels good to win. Not everybody likes that every time, but there are people that you can incentivize to move incredibly quickly through competition. Let's talk a little bit about some of these in detail. Crowdsourcing. I'm just going to give some examples of things that I love. This is an organization called WildMe that we work closely with. They started out as whaleshark.org, and if you haven't looked at this, what this began with was a recognition that whale sharks, one of the most elusive fish in the sea, are also very threatened and very difficult to study because they come up from the deep randomly in various places. But they have these unique spots on them, a unique pattern to every animal. And a NASA scientist, a computer vision expert at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and a Dell engineer got together and created, based on NASA's star mapping technology, a computer vision algorithm that could identify individual whale sharks. And now they have increased something like 20-fold the number of known whale sharks globally. They've even got bots that are actually scanning Vimeo and YouTube and Facebook every day for tourist pictures and videos of whale sharks. Those bots will interact directly with the people that post them and say, hey, you just filmed a shark that's named something like this. Did you know the last time it was spotted was on the other side of the planet? And that's even turning new people into passionate conservationists, harnessing the power of global citizens who don't even necessarily know that they're now a part of the conservation movement. They're getting excited and enthusiastic about it and providing incredible data that never existed before. They've applied this to Grevy's zebra, improving the estimates of population sizes for managers from uncertainty levels around 50% to something lower than 5%. Giraffes have been done, etc., all using various AI approaches. And these tourist pictures and videos, capitalizing on real citizen science. Ebert is another great example, coming out of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology for many years, which has thousands of people, 3 million observations. I have no idea how the 252 countries exist, but they've apparently expanded the number of countries and jurisdictions from those that even the UN recognizes with Ebert observations. Their brand new app, if you haven't downloaded it, is called Merlin. Is amazing. I'm constantly sitting in my backyard now, checking bird songs against things and such. It's really incredibly fun. I know you all know about crowdfunding, but it's good to remind ourselves about the change in this alone. Check out what happened from 2010 to 2014, from less than $1 billion to $16 billion. And then in 2015, a single year, more than 100% increase in crowdfunding. In fact, crowdfunding now is greater globally than the entire sum of venture capital money available. There's more money in the crowd than venture capital. This means you don't even have to go directly to Silicon Valley if you have an opportunity to turn people on to various things. And this includes new crowd investment structures that the federal, that US legislation allows it. I know Dorothy can tell you even more about having been deeply involved in some of these things. But this does mean that access to capital is available in a way that it never was before. Check this out. We're talking about countries that raised the most money in 2015. It's global in scope. It's global in scope. It's coming from all over the place with money going to projects everywhere. The estimate by 2016 was 660 million. I couldn't find a new estimate now, but if you look at these projections, we're probably well over $1 billion flowing around to just the developing world, which is incredible. Let me talk a little bit about these kinds of tools because these are remarkable. Prizes and challenges have been around for a very long time. In fact, commercial aviation, which we're no longer using, was born of Charles Lindbergh trying to win an Orteig Prize, a $25,000 prize for the first person to fly across the Atlantic Ocean, which he won. Within 18 months, commercial air travel in the United States had increased 30 times in 18 months because of this prize, inspiring the public to make this valuable. Airline innovation and stocks soared as a result. This stopped being used during much of these methods during much of the 20th century, largely because of the rise of centralized government research and R&D funding and large corporate funding, things like NSF or Bell Labs doing these kinds of things. But there's been a real renaissance this century, this millennium, in prizes and challenges. Just some examples of what we're doing and I worked at XPRIZE, obviously, the Ansari XPRIZE for the $10 million for the first team to go into space was one of those markers that really catapulted the use of these tools into the stratosphere, so to speak, including inspiring Elon to start SpaceX, which we've seen recently, continuing to transform the world. We at Conservation X Labs are applying this directly to conservation as well in different ways, including working with the Rocky Mountain Institute and the Indian government on something called the Global Cooling Prize. This is about transforming room air conditioning, which according to Project Drawdown is one of the most effective, highly leveraged things that we as a planet can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions globally. We reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we're talking about saving species because climate change is a force multiplier to all the stressors causing this. And in fact, once we get these kinds of tools rolled out globally, by the end of the century, this can be the equivalent of 1 degree Celsius of warming avoided. Just in India alone, where the government has stated that they will require all new room single unit air conditioners sold in the country to meet this technology standard of being 5 times better for the climate. They will require that moving forward. That alone is 0.5 degree Celsius globally by the end of the century that we're avoiding through one prize and one action from a government to do something remarkable. That's the kind of power and leverage and the kind of exponential solutions we need. We currently, right now at Conservation X Labs, with a huge global coalition of partners that are from governments to nonprofits, are working on the Artisanal Mining Grant Challenge. This is an issue that's causing massive destruction, as you can see in this image, in places like the Amazon, the Congo Basin, Madagascar, Indonesia. Just taking a look at gold mining, artisanal and small scale mining. So small holder folks, these are individuals that tend to extract the gold using barrels of mercury that they stand in and then dump the effluent of mercury and cyanide into these massive pools that you see here after having stripped the entire forest, this is the Amazon, free of any trees and then the soil where the gold is. That all actually produces more than 1/3 of the gold globally. those kinds of activities, and are responsible for about 40% of the mercury pollution globally, including aerosolized mercury that gets into the ocean, into the fish, and into our diets. So this is an issue that's kind of under the radar. The supply chains are opaque. It's in places far away, and the people involved in it are among the poorest on the planet. But it's also causing this massive destruction to the environment. We've got a challenge that's being judged right now, with results to come this fall. We'll be excited to share it, to look at breakthrough opportunities for fixing things at the site of the mine, to supporting those miners themselves, looking at ways to rethink the supply chain, and data-based approaches that can help us better interrogate and understand what to do globally, especially with the kind of demand that those of us using computers that have gold and rare earth minerals and other things that come from these artisanal mining sites are responsible for. We also recently ran a smaller one. These don't all have to be large challenges. The Ohia challenge, the iconic tree of Hawaii, the Ohia tree, in 2014, a brand new fungal pathogen emerged, an invasive pathogen that leads to rapid death of these trees. Once infected, it's within 2 weeks that a tree will die. And it's incredibly difficult to know where this was. So we created a $70,000 prize with the National Park Service and the Department of the Interior to identify new solutions. The winning solution was this amazing use of a drone with spectral thermal imaging to identify rapidly the spread of this fungus so that it can be quarantined extremely quickly. He came up with this prototype, created this solution incredibly fast using these exponential technologies we talked about, and is now deploying them with the National Park Service in Ohia, potentially saving a tree that's not only a keystone species of Hawaii, but actually represents culturally an incredibly important piece of Hawaiian history. And I love the examples of prizes because we're talking about empowering everyone today. The people that come out of the woodworks, I could give lots of stories of who these folks are. One of my favorite, my co-founder at Conservation X Labs, when he was at USAID, started the grand challenges for development. And the first one was called Saving Lives at Birth, looking for ways to prevent maternal and infant birth within the 24 hours surrounding labor and delivery. This was the winner of that. He looks like a brilliant scientist. He created this incredibly cheap device that could extract babies during obstructed labor, which in many communities where health provisions are low, commonly leads to both maternal and infant death. He's from Argentina, but he was a car mechanic, and he came up with this idea because he liked to drink wine and was thinking about how you get a cork that's stuck in a bottle of wine out of this thing. Genius, dude. This thing is now, it's called the Odon device. It's commercialized, it's scaled. This is what we're talking about by empowering everyone. Who knew that an Argentinian car mechanic that liked his wine would have a breakthrough solution that is now saving tens of thousands of lives to date of the most vulnerable around the world? I mean, this is the kind of power that exists everywhere today if we embrace these exponential tools. We ran a Blue Economy Challenge around rethinking aquaculture, and just want to point out, out of 221 project entries, they came from I think 45 different countries around the world with new solutions to aquaculture, which is incredibly damaging, and ideas that ranged from those of a Thai shrimp farmer to a group of materials scientists in London. Doesn't matter where you are if you can help solve the problem. I know you all know about hackathons, phenomenal tools. Just an example of one that we've done. This was called Make for the Planet. We did this twice, once in Washington, D.C., another time in Borneo, because if you're going to do it once, why not do it in the jungles of Indonesia the second time, which was even better than everything. Within 5 days, we had solutions that included, you can see there, an ROV they built, a working ROV with mapping technology that was as good as anything commercially available at the time. They built that within 5 days. The winning team at the very top you see there, called Lobster Lift. This was a tool, they're right whales, about 500 individuals of right whales, highly endangered species in the Atlantic Ocean. One of their biggest threats is actually the ropes that connect a lobster pot at the bottom of the ocean to the buoy that's up above, and they get entangled in these ropes. And so there's long been looking for a way to solve this problem, because there's a conflict between lobster fishers and these endangered right whales. And a member of one of the leading organizations working to do this actually recently stood up and said, the only good solution we've ever seen is Lobster Lift, which gets rid of the rope entirely, includes a sonic key, a unique sonic key that will tell the pot to inflate a certain, essentially a balloon, and rise it to the surface when it's there. So the rope is gone entirely. These guys came up with this idea. They were all in their 20s and prototyped and created this prototype within 5 days. And it's now considered one of the best solutions to this unique conservation threat. That's the power of this kind of harnessing of innovation. More than just these competitions, though, we love collaboration. We love collaboration. You all know what it is because things like Wikipedia are mass collaboration. But there's also really great examples like open source drug discovery. When it was clear that big pharma was not going to invest in diseases like TB and malaria and other diseases that aren't very profitable, a group of international scientists came together, thousands of them, over 5,000 scientists, to create open source drugs for this. And they did. They created breakthrough license-free drugs for malaria and TB. One of the things that I think is greatest about this, we talk about motivation. The largest proportion of people participating in this were scientists at big pharma, doing it both on the clock and just for fun because they were passionate about it and wanted to do something. People want to do good if we give them an opportunity, even if the price signal isn't there. iNaturalist, I love this app. I'm sure a lot of you have this. It's a phenomenal tool that allows everyone to collaborate because not only is there AI in there that's telling you what the species might be, there's a huge community of naturalists learning from each other, helping to improve identification, and then researching things like the spread of invasive species or the emergence of butterflies one year to the next, which is incredible data that this collaborative tool is empowering us to use. And Dorothy mentioned our digital maker space at Conservation X Labs. We've built a virtual space where people can come with a problem and with expertise, create a project, iterate and prototype that project, eventually to turn it into something real with lots of different ways. I encourage all of you to jump on board conservationx.com. We need your thinking because we're trying to take the power and the passion and the expertise that you all represent and give that a voice globally for conservation threats specifically. Some of the things that have come out of our conservationx.com digital makerspace include a computer vision tool called Chimp Face that uses facial recognition to scan social media for primates that are being illegally trafficked and identifying individual ones. The woman who started this she's not a computer vision expert. She was in her spare time volunteering to look through Alibaba posts, Facebook posts, and others for places that people were posting pictures of chimps for sale. She thought, you know what, if Facebook can tag my face in a picture I didn't upload, couldn't they do this for a chimpanzee? Answer is absolutely. Hooked her up with a computer vision expert, Colin, who you know, Dorothy, and they're creating these amazing tools now that are starting to be deployed, which is amazing. Cargo Screen, which came out of here to identify high-risk shipments for shark fin trafficking. Is there a likelihood so that customs agents can know to hold something because it's likely to have shark fins or endangered sharks in there? OpenTag, an open source tagging item for marine mammals and other marine organisms to understand their biology. Similarly, the Shark Fitbit, which measures shark activity and much like a Fitbit can tell all this information about their physiology. And a next-gen camera trap, which is using edge AI processing to know not just if there is a rhinoceros, but which rhinoceros, whether it's healthy, if it has a particular disease state, and alerting managers and others of what's going on in close to real time, taking out all the problems with massive bandwidth that comes from most existing camera traps. As a part of that, one of the things that we run is called the Konnex Tech Prize. Every year we run this, and we're just about to announce the finalists for the third iteration of the Konnex Tech Prize, which is meant to just be a juice great ideas. So you come in with nothing more than an idea, and we will award $3,500 to the 20 finalists. That $3,500 is meant to get your prototype just a bit moving, and then the best one to make turn that prototype out gets $20,000. To date, we've awarded $300,000 in prizes, and what we've seen is remarkable because with just a little bit of money, we've seen people take their ideas to things that are now starting to get massive grants from both government and foundations, and starting to even be deployed in the world, which I think is incredible. That doesn't take very much money. Sometimes it's just the validation that this idea was a good one. We've started to add to that, though. It's not just competition, not just a prize, actual collaborative action. So we're working with Carnegie Mellon and their Human Computer Interaction Institute to think about peer advising. So even people that don't make it through to the finals are a part of this peer advising. And we found that even if they don't make it through, they keep participating. They want, out of the passion and goodness of their interests, to continue to help those finalists improve things. So we build these reciprocal relationships and help them give feedback. And we've even seen the quality of ideas and the quality of submissions increase relative to those control groups. We're doing this as an experiment. Those control groups that didn't receive peer advising, indicating that these exponential tools that we have, including collaboration, are there for the taking and can accelerate the development of real breakthroughs. All in all, in sum, this is about people. And this is about building the tribe for conservation's future. You see this image here. This is an image of what was the old field of tropical medicine, which was really just a bunch of white male doctors from the United States and Europe going into the tropics and trying to apply their existing knowledge that they learned in medical school in those places wherein, of course, the climate, the conditions, the economies, and certainly the health conditions and disease states were completely different, and just apply them directly. Didn't work, as you might imagine. But tropical medicine evolved, and it brought in new fields, and it started turning into something that's now global health over the 20th century, with a lot of effort from many different groups, governments, civil society, activists, and more. And of course, those at the heart of it, that brought in engineers, brought in economists, brought in psychologists, brought in people from these tropical communities themselves, and began training in situ and developing capacity in these places, so that you had a tribe in global health that is now incredibly diverse, both geographically, demographically, and especially from a disciplinary and a field-based manner. And it's transformed our ability to create real solutions, including things like open source drug discovery, which I mentioned, which was actually led by a group out of India. Closer to the problems, closer to the solutions. That's what we want to do with conservation as well. It's about cultivating a new community, new disciplines, new perspectives, new energy, new approaches brought in to help transform a field that desperately needs it, so that we can overcome those exponential problems with real exponential solutions. These are the three things I just want you to remember from my thoughts. Please embrace the exponentials. There is power in exponential thinking. There is power in exponential tools. There is power in a global crowd. If we use that exponential thinking, what you all do on a daily basis is right at the heart of this, to empower the global crowd. Then we can reward not just individual successes, but our collective success in overcoming the sixth mass extinction. With that, I will thank you for all of your attention, and excited to hear your questions and thoughts, and get into a fantastic discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. That was amazing. It's so many great stories. And I'm like following the chat too, and there's just so much great dialogue. The group that was WildMe, actually, one of our makers said that they're based in Portland, Oregon, in the PDX hackerspace. So that's like a cool story to kind of tie together our community. So I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions for Dr. Bunje, please go ahead and put your questions in the Zoom chat there, and then we'll be able to give those to him to answer. Also, we are keeping track of everything. Thank you for the individuals that we're adding in links. We'll make sure all the links and all the chat go into our notes document, and we'll be able to access that afterwards as well. So, let's see, everyone's like, we're downloading the apps. This is great.
Love those apps, so that's great.
All right, I'm trying to scroll through and see if there are any questions coming in. So I guess I have a question, but if no one's going to ask a question right now. Oh, actually, well, someone came in with a question. So let me ask the other person's question first, and then I can go in with my question. So it says, are you organized as chapters? How would we best find someone else near me?
Fantastic question.
Yeah.
We're actually beginning to roll out, so our community manager is beginning to roll out a program that will have geographic clusters and such. We haven't done that yet. But it's something we could actually even use help on if you're keen to help. I would recommend either sending a note to off our webpage at info there to Tom. You can just say, hey Tom, he'll see it. Or joining the digital makerspace and posting on there, because that's a place where we're going to use that for these kinds of clusters. we're in the process of redoing the back end of the digital makerspace to make that really efficient and effective as well. But it's a great question and a direction we've wanted to move, because I think it's important that people be able to meet up and engage with folks that are proximate to them as well.
I think a follow-on question that went in, I think you're probably reading it too, is what ask do you have of the maker community that is specific? Getting info about these initiatives is great, but is there a more specific ask to support your work?
I love that. Thank you, Maria. Yes. And actually the very specific ask would be, we run a lot of these challenges and other open innovation types of programs. I would ask that all of you join us in recruiting folks to participate in them. So right now there's nothing open, but there will be in the fall. We're actually going to launch a grand challenge to rethink microplastics, and more specifically microfibers, ways of rethinking the materials, ways of thinking about keeping them out of our waterways and the ocean, and ways of remediating the harm. It's going to be at least a $500,000 purse associated with it that we're announcing. And we need as many new thinkers as possible to be a part of it. You all can be of great help in just getting the word out to people that may have an idea associated with that. I think that would be the biggest thing that can happen. And I think, Dorothy, we usually send something to you at
yes,
NomCon.
yes, it will definitely go into our newsletter when it goes out.
Look out in the newsletter whenever NomCon sends out the newsletter. The Conservation X Labs has a new challenge, because you all are close to the people that probably know how to solve it. The other specific aspects on the back end, we don't necessarily know who the good solvers are or how to reach them, right? And that dialogue is very difficult. You all are in a position to potentially be kind of translators and say, oh, I see what this challenge is looking for. They didn't say that they needed a PCB designer, but they do. That would be helpful. So I'm going to get these electrical engineers over here to apply to it, sort of thing. So.
Yeah, and I think making those connections are really important. The next question is actually something that I was thinking about, so I'm glad someone asked it, which is, are any of the program's challenges targeted towards beginners or more specifically the youth? And I want to piggyback on that, because I was thinking about that as you were talking about the microplastics, because my daughter, who's an elementary school student, actually had a whole unit on it. And so she's super excited. Awesome. And who knows if the next answer is going to come from a fifth grader. So yeah, what are your programs look like, or how do you get youth engaged?
Fantastic question. For the microplastics, we're actually hoping to engage a youth program associated with it. We're working with Earth Echo, which is an organization started by Philippe Cousteau, that also runs the World Water Challenge for schools and students. They reach millions of students globally. If anybody knows, this is a specific ask, we're fundraising for that program right now. So if anybody knows of someone that wants to help on educational campaigns and educational work as a part of this, for us, we tend to work in partnership in everything we do, and most of our expertise is not around the youth and education. So we're keen to work with those of you who have that kind of expertise. We were also just approached by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, who's interested in doing a challenge explicitly for high school students about rethinking food as well. And so hopefully we'll be able to tell you about that coming up as well. This is a little bit of new territory, and we have to learn all of the legal ramifications around working with minors, but I couldn't agree more, Dorothy. I've got children of my own that are constantly saying, I got an idea.
So Dr. Leah Haynes, who was our keynote yesterday, wants to work with you on youth, and she has a lot of youth programs running, and she cares deeply about conservation. So I think it's a wonderful mix. So she has volunteered to work with you and contact you. So I will make sure you guys are connected after, which this makes me so happy. It's like,
that's fantastic. Thanks, Leah.
That's exactly what I planned. All my keynotes working together. So there are some other questions coming in as well. So someone asked, how do you decide which causes are chosen to develop a challenge around?
Really good question. Really good question. We've initiated a project that looks a little bit like Project Drawdown in that what we're trying to do is order where we can have the most bang for our buck on working on these things. So to date, most conservation efforts have been around identifying the species that are most at risk, hotspots of biodiversity, places under threat. But what we need to know is what things can be done that will reverse that trend, which is very different, right? Because I mentioned meat as an example. We could put up another national park in the Amazon, but if we're not reducing the demand for beef and the soy that's grown to feed it, then we're not reducing the pressure that's causing deforestation in the Amazon, right? Or one of the major pressures. So we need to flip it and look at that. So things like food systems. So we've begun a project to do that very rigorously. We'd be interested if anyone's interested in helping on that. We're at very earliest stages of consideration. But we've also done that in bucketed areas. And if you go to our website, you can actually find 2 landscape analyses, one around oceans and one around water and biodiversity, where we went through a rigorous process evaluating these to identify which grand challenges would have the most bang for your buck. So for example, out of water, we came up with artisanal mining, which we didn't realize would be such a massive threat. Came up with the microplastics issue that came out of there. There was a nutrient challenge associated with overnutrient of agricultural lands that results in eutrophication in water and such because of nitrogen and phosphorus. The Schmidt Foundation actually picked that up and turned it up into a grant program as a result. So we do go through sort of a rigorous research process. And like I said before, we work in collaboration with everyone. I should have said this. Networks are one of the best exponential tools in the world, and leveraging networks gives you more power than anything. So we work in partnership and at every step of the way, simply because there's no other way to accomplish the goals that I think all of us share. So I would love anybody who's interested in working on that with us.
So the questions keep coming in. So one really great question, I just lost it scrolling here. Okay, in the programs you work on, how do you ensure that participants represent a diversity of race, class, and gender? And I actually think about this because obviously you said you're working in very varied parts of the world. And, you know, I'm actually interested in like the representation also of the different people. And I know it was intentional that you actually had your Make for the Planet in a different location the second time. And so maybe you can speak a little bit to how you do ensure that you're getting a variety of representation within your challenges.
It's a great question. And it's actually something that's been a topic of direct discussion for us recently, considering everything that is happening. And the first thing is that challenges, by their very nature, are much better at surveying a huge global array of people. And in fact, on the artisanal mining challenge, we had, I'm blanking on the exact numbers, but the majority of entrants were from developing countries. They included the most are always from the United States. This always happens, just in terms of sheer numbers. And after that, it was India, Brazil, Kenya, I think, might have been number 3. Like it was just Indonesia was high on the list, etc. So we're seeing real massive representation that way, which is incredible. The other thing on our digital makerspace, the individual that has created and instigated the most projects is this fantastic gentleman from Ethiopia, who is just an idea machine. Not every idea is great, but some of them are quite genius. So we've actually seen. And we've actually seen over time, as we have been more intentional about going to other communities around the world with our recruitment and engaging relationships with folks, we've seen that kind of diversity increase. That's another place of request for help, though. You know, if we aren't reaching the right communities, we're not using language that people hear, or through channels that people are on, or not in the same, not in right Facebook groups or whatever it is, we need to do better at that, and we need to be able to reach folks more. That's an effort I think we're also keen to get better and better at, because while a prize, for example, allows anybody to win, irrespective of who they are or where they're from, they have to hear about it first. And then secondly, quite candidly, this is a place where you all can come in, they have to have the resources to compete, to do something. And those resources are not distributed equally, of course. So the more we can actually give space to people to have those resources. That's one of the things with the Konnex Tech Prize that we like so much, is sometimes it just takes a little bit of money, but you might then need a local makerspace to go in and use some equipment to show out your prototype. With the hackathons, we did the same thing. We partnered with makerspaces to come into the space so that everyone had access to all the 3D printers they wanted, the soldering stations they wanted, et cetera, so that those resources aren't limited. But I would actually love to partner with more makerspaces to enable that sort of access, because that can be a real barrier to people.
So Paul, can we share your email in the bio, the way, unfortunately, Sketch works, even though you've shared your email with us, not everybody else can see that. So is it okay to share your email in the bio so it's public?
Yeah, I just put it in the chat as well.
Awesome, because I know I'm getting a lot of maker spaces that are excited, like, how do we work with them? How do we work with them? So just want to make sure people know how to reach you directly. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of questions. So are the grand challenges usually open source? Do you provide a platform for them to share the designs?
That is up to the instigators and the innovators. So yes, there's a platform to share designs, and we link out to GitHub and other sorts of places if people are interested in doing that. But we also allow people to keep their technology proprietary if that's more valuable. And that's partly because we want to capitalize on all the different tools for scaling up solutions. Open source is a phenomenal tool. Sometimes profit is a phenomenal tool for doing so. And so we leave that, and we will advise, as you might imagine, but we don't want to prejudge what the best way of getting scale is.
Awesome. Another question that came in is, are you able to reach people in a variety of languages?
We are just starting to do that. So the Artisanal Mining Challenge, we produced everything in English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. And we are going to be translating all of the things that we do shortly into those languages, and then we'll expand to Chinese and a few others shortly as well. It's not cheap, so it's been a slow rollout. But yeah, that is important, obviously.
And then I think we're going to wrap up with this, which is just a piece of information. So Nan asked a really great question about, can we create a shared Slack channel between Conservation X Labs and Nation of Makers? And I said, absolutely. But I have probably to just make sure I talk with Tom. Yeah. But I did say that Tom Quickly is already a member of our Slack workspace, and he's totally happy when people email him. or message him. He's very much on Slack. He's very digital all the time. And he's just a great guy if you haven't met him, if you hadn't had a chance to meet him at NomCon yet. So definitely reach out and tell him of your interest, and he will definitely get you plugged into the digital makerspace. We're trying to work hard to get more makers over on that side, and to get makers talking to the conservation experts, because they're, again, generally not people that talk to each other. And I want to put a plug in, I think one of the questions, I'll take this is the last question. There are no more questions in the chat there. Just talking a little, just to ask you to talk a little bit about how do we continue to sort of do this work to work together, and how do we make sure that we are plugging into, there's so many challenges we can do, and I know that Nation Makers tries to put out a lot of challenges, and sometimes it seems overwhelming. It's like, you just asked us to go, like there's a geothermal prize challenge session after this. How do you make the right, I guess just talking about, like, how do you decide which is the right challenge for you, and how do you get plugged in, especially if you might feel uncomfortable with the subject matter? I don't know, do you have any sort of closing thoughts on that?
So that's a great question, actually. And there's nothing formal, but I think it would be useful to have something formal on that. I've always looked at it from the perspective of running a challenge and how do I find the right people for it. But it's a great question of what would I, as an individual, how would I attach myself to something to be valuable? I don't have a great answer, I guess, but I that might be a space where we should collaborate and think about identifying things, because I can think of some issues right offhand. There's obviously the what am I good at and what am I interested in, but also we need to be clear about what is required, what kind of effort is needed. Are there other people that need to be brought in to do this? Is it are there other resources that are needed? In other words, is it something I can do? Is kind of
Right. And I think, there is, something that I've been thinking about too, to that point about, as we share these out, what is the barrier to entry? And one, how can we reduce the barrier to entry for anybody who is interested in a particular topic? And how do we give them the information so that they're informed and able to move forward? But then I think thinking about some of the things you said around resources, these are real important things. And I think, right now, and yesterday we talked about this a bit, in both my opening and then also in our core principles, is just, how do we ensure that people have fair access to what we're doing? So we give access to tools, pretty democratized access to tools and equipment in our maker spaces, but how do we, really tool up people to answer these important questions? We know that our maker community really does have the ability to to answer these questions really meaningfully and make an impact, but how do we ensure that, there is an equity in who hears about these things, who gets access to them, and who has not just the tools, but the supplies, right? And, and even the volunteer hours and all the other things that go into it to be able to devote to this. How do you ensure those resources? So I think maybe it's just a nugget for everyone to take back, right? Like, how do we think about this? And is there a way that we can shape working together? So I think as a tangible next step, we will definitely create that cross channel between Conservation X Labs and Nation of Makers on Slack. So look forward to that one and join it if you're interested in this. And then Dr. Bunje, thank you so much again for joining us today. Thank you for putting your email in. We will make sure that it's also in your bio and Schedule. So if people want to contact you and talk more about how they can get plugged in, they can do so.
Well,
thank you everybody
for
joining us.
Thanks to everyone for all your great work.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.